In today's episode, Mitch asks, what's the best leveling software for podcasting? What are the recommended techniques and settings? So leveling, for those who are unfamiliar, is the process of taking an audio file and making the volume consistent. When you're doing a podcast, when you're doing any kind of video or audio, you want the experience to be evenly normalized so that it's not loud in some parts and quiet in other parts. You've likely had this experience if you've watched regular television where you're watching a show and then suddenly a commercial comes on. It gets way louder. You're like, whoa, that was a little intense. Leveling fixes that. Leveling also, depending on how you use the software, can help make audio easier to hear, particularly for things like noisy environments, like a commute, a gym, etc. Not much of a problem at home because people can just turn up the volume. But if you're trying to listen and deal with background noise of any kind, leveling helps fix that. Way back in the day, in the early days of podcasting, this was a great piece of software from the Conversations Network called the Levelator. That has since been discontinued. It's been discontinued for a couple of years. So the question that a lot of folks have is, what's the replacement? The software that I use is one called Auphonic. Now, there's a bunch of different versions of this. Auphonic you can find over at auphonic.com. And they have two different versions. They have their web service version, and then they have desktop applications. I am a big fan of desktop applications because software as a service, upload to the web and do stuff like that, is fine for some applications. It's not my favorite. I would rather have the piece of software that runs on my desk that I can use. So how does this thing work? I use the multitrack edition. There's two desktop editions. There's a single file edition, and then there's a multitrack. Multitrack, obviously by its name, requires you to have at least two audio files that you want to level both independently and together, merge them together into one. If you do any kind of recording where you are recording two different tracks, for example, using software like Audio Hijack. Audio Hijack is a fantastic piece of software that allows you to record one microphone and then like your Skype or Zoom or Google Hangout session, record the second one. That gives you two different audio files that you then have to merge together. If you only record a single audio file, A, you're playing with fire, and B, you'd want the single track desktop edition. So let's look at how this works. When you first jump into Auphonic, you get this environment here. Now, caveat, if you do only record one audio file at a time, but you want the flexibility of someday maybe needing to be able to merge two together, I would use the multitrack edition. And what I would do in those cases is when I have a single file, I simply make a copy of it, and now I have two files that work perfectly with the multitrack edition. Generally speaking, when it comes to this sort of thing, let's go ahead and do this. Let's do this, call it You Ask, I Answer. And you get a chance to choose what algorithms you want. You want the adaptive leveler, to make sure it's turned on. You want cross-gating, and you want the volume to be set to -16 LUFS. There's a whole bunch of interesting audio theory, but for the moment, that's generally the best setting. When it comes to each of the individual tracks, just make sure that adaptive noise gate and high-pass filter are on, noise and hum reduction is auto, foreground is auto, and the same is true for the second track. Then you have your output track named whatever you want. Now, again, if you want to get super technical, you can go into the preferences and specify all these different types of algorithm changes. Do you want it to be a WAV file? Do you want it to be an MP3? Most people, most of the time, probably want a WAV file as the initial export when you're taking like an interview that you've recorded, because in a lot of cases, you're going to take that file and do something with it. You're going to add music to it and things like that. The same for sample rates and bit depths and stuff. Chances are you're going to want to leave that as is. You can change the directory. One thing that's nice about what Auphonic does is if you have intro and outro audio, you can automatically sew it to the output file. I personally don't do that. I use an editor, Adobe Audition, to do that. Because I would prefer to be able to manipulate it as needed. But if you wanted to put that into your workflow, like you have a consistent intro and outro that you always use and never changes, this would be the way to do that. So let's go ahead and process these files. What it's going to do is, again, take those two files. In this case, because they're identical, you'll just get the same thing out. And it's going to merge them together, do all of the leveling, the noise reduction, the sweetening of the audio to make it sound great. One catch: do not use this on music at all, ever. The Levelator had the same warnings. It will sound like somebody sneezing into a tin can or something like that. It just does not come out sounding good. And you can see here it's starting to spit out the master track and then each track individually leveled. Now let's look at what this has done. This is the original file. You can see here there are spots in this audio file which are really quiet, spots that are particularly loud. Let's go ahead and now open up the leveled file. And you can see it's a lot. It's a much better looking file. Let's go back to this original one here. See how it's not quite as rich or leveled, and there's some volume inconsistencies. In the revised version, things look a lot better. Things look a lot cleaner. And it's ready to go. So, to recap, make sure that you've got the correct edition for the way that you do the workflow. Again, I like multitrack. I don't mind the little workaround if you've only got one audio file, but having that flexibility for recording from multiple pieces of software is very helpful. Minus 16 LUFS is the setting you want, adaptive level and cross gates, and then make sure that the fore and background stuff and the noise and hum reduction are auto. You can do ducking. You can specify which track should sound more prominent. I personally think that for what I'm using this for is in podcasting, you don't need those things. Having the option to have it is terrific because you want that level of flexibility. They are working on a version, it's in beta right now, that is capable of dealing with music and fixing music too. So if you're a musician, you'll want to keep your eye on that because that could be very interesting and very exciting. For target loudness, unless you're doing something other than podcast, I would stick the minus 16 LUFS, even if you're going to use that audio with video. So I will edit, for example, the audio from my speaking videos and use the exact same setting. It sounds fine, and it's what people are used to hearing when it comes to podcasts. If you have follow-up questions about the software, feel free to leave them in the comments box below. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and the newsletter. I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Want help solving your company's data, analytics, and digital marketing problems? Visit trustinsights.ai today and let us know how we can help you.